Hello, thank you for coming tonight and welcome to Conversations with Writers. I'm Sigrid from Lavender Menace Queer Books Archive, and I'm happy to introduce our second online event, bringing queer authors of different generations together. I'd like to start though by saying that this event is a safe space. It's here to be affirming for everyone using it. We want you to feel it's a space where you are respected and validated. Very occasionally, events like this include people who try to disrupt them. If anything happens which makes you feel uncomfortable, be sure to tell us in the chat. Safe spaces are everything to do with this event. Bob and I founded Lavender Menace Lesbian and Gay Community Bookshop in Edinburgh in 1982 in order to create an affirming space for queer people. We'd all been to gay bars and meetings, but the bookshop was different. It surrounded visitors with queer cover images, postcards, cartoons celebrating queer people, and badges with slogans like, "I'm one too." We also had our disruptors back then. For instance, one person who stood beside the political pamphlets singing hymns. He didn't stay long though. He couldn't compete with the voices of 5,000 queer writers. Their voices were loud and proud. It was the books that made the space safe. The 1970s, 80s, and 90s were the most creative period in queer history up till then. But after 15 years, things were changing with the arrival of the internet, and publishing began to change too. Queer and feminist publishers and bookshops closed, including Lavender Menace's successor shop, West and Wild, which was run by Bob and his now husband, Raymond Rose. By 2019, we found that many younger people had never heard of some of the best known writers of 25 years ago, whose books changed people's lives. So Bob and I have started Lavender Menace Queer Books Archive to make sure that the imagination and the spirit of the books we sold stay alive for future generations. Meanwhile, new queer writing is as powerful as ever, and last week a new bookshop, Queerlit, opened in Manchester. We're not able to stage this event in a bookshop, though we're working on a home for the archive in the future. But Bob, who's doing the tech tonight, will be showing slideshow illustrations during the breaks. They feature book covers and portraits of our 3 guest writers and other pictures of queer book life. And we want them to reflect the safe space quality we work to create in the shop. We'll have our social media addresses on the chat, and as well as the link to a blog on our website, which will be up soon and tell you more about our 3 guests. I'm now going to hand over to one of the newest queer writers, Eris Young, author of They, Their, Them, and writer in residence at Lighthouse Bookshop. They're going to be sharing tonight's conversation with Joe Clifford and Ely Percy. Thank you for coming. Eris, welcome, and thanks for being part of this event.
Thank you so much, Sigrid. I'm really happy to be here. So hi, everyone. I'm Eris. I'll be chairing tonight's conversation. But before I get started, I just want to say a few words about the ways that Lavender Menace are preserving and promoting classic and underappreciated works of queer and LGBT+ writing. So first is the collection of physical books that Sigrid mentioned. It's currently in the basement at Lighthouse Bookshop, but yeah, as we said, we're hoping to make it available to the public in the future. There's also the online catalog that will be interactive eventually. And of course, there's this event series. So Lavender Menace are hosting a range of events focusing on queer authors and queer writing. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce playwright Joe Clifford, who wrote the very beautiful play Jesus, Queen of Heaven, and novelist Ely Percy, who has just released an amazing new novel, Duck Feet. Rather than reading out their extensive biographies, I'd like to let each of our guests introduce themselves by answering the question, how would you describe your work to someone who's never read or experienced it? Joe, would you go first, please?
That's a very difficult question. I'd say it was unlike anything else that you will have seen or witnessed. My plays have always been different from everybody else's, and for a long time I couldn't really understand why, and then eventually it became clear to me it's because I'm a trans writer, and so my voice is a trans voice. And I have been writing plays, trans plays, since 1980. So I've written a lot of them. I started when I was living as a man, and then when in the 2000s I started to live as a woman, I then discovered that I had the capacity to perform. And so it was sort of in my late 60s, really. So now I think of myself as a writer and a performer. And I'm also very proudly a father and a grandmother. And I think that's me.
Eli?
I'd say it was incredibly Scottish, incredibly queer, and most of the time incredibly jaunty. I think a lot of the I've sort of I like to sort of try out different genres and different styles. At the moment, I've been doing some speculative stuff, writing about werewolves and alien invasions. I've got an alien invasion story coming out quite soon, and I'm sort of trying out how, like, writing about people who don't have a gender through these mediums, and it's quite interesting. Often I'll write from a place of lack if I don't see somebody represented, or like for me being agender, I'll try and write. I've been trying to write about not mentioning gender in the stories and seeing whether that matters or not. So yeah, it's been a period, the last couple of months have been a period of sort of trying new things.
Great, thank you both so much. So let's start off with a couple of readings, which we have prepared today. Eli, will you go first?
Yeah, sure. So I'm going to read from the opening of my novel, Vicky, Romeo plus Jules, which is a butch meets femme lesbian rom-com set in Glasgow in 2001. So I'm just going to read from the start of it. I only ever cried over 3 people in my life. First time, I was 6 years old, and Matt had just told me that Dad had gone to live someplace else, and that he wasn't ever coming back. Now, I loved my daddy. I thought he was the best dad in the world. He used to sing to me. He used to sing all the old jazz and blues classics by stars like Sinatra and Nat King Cole. He took all his records with him the day he moved out. And the note I left about the money for my school trip, he didn't even sign it. The second time I cried was when my first girlfriend left me. I was sweet 16 and never been kissed until I met her. I was in love the very first time. I thought I'd spend the rest of my life with her, then she broke my heart. It was a long time later. Felt like a lifetime before I met another girl. I fell in love all over again. From the very first moment I ever set eyes on her, I knew she was special. Her name was Jules, and she was the third. I cried again today. I've been dusting, keeping myself busy, trying to forget, when I found an old lipstick under my bed. French kiss. From the Miss Selfridge range, she'd said. I recognised the shiny silver heart imprinted on the bottom like a kiss mark. I ran my fingers over the smooth, lean body of the silver container. There was a small hairline fracture. I remembered now. That first day we'd met, she'd been walking towards the bar, rummaging around in her handbag when she dropped it. I picked it up, gently fingered it, then gave it back. First thing I noticed about her was her nails. Small, slender, sculpted like her body and painted baby pink to match her pouting lips. Jules was the most beautiful girlfriend a girl could ever have. As I lightly traced the crack with the tip of my finger, it widened into a small heart-shaped gap about 1 millimetre in girth. Slowly, I removed the top. All that was left was a trace of molten pink. So we go back, there's a flashback at this point. goes back to when Vicky first meets Jules. Can I buy you a kiss? I say. She laughs as I stumble over my words. I mean, can I buy you a drink? What is wrong with me tonight? She must think I'm a total pussy. I've never had this problem before. I'm not normally this apprehensive with women, but there's something cat-like, something predatory about her. I can tell at a glance that this kitten is a star fucker of the highest order. You can try, she replies, jerking her head and running her fingers through her mane of burnt auburn hair. Her poison is Malibu, straight with plenty of ice and a slice of lemon. I'm impressed. Now this is a lady who knows exactly what she wants. And as for me, well, it's Friday night and all I want is to have a few drinks and then get laid. The girls say I'm cute. I'm told I have a certain Leonardo DiCaprio-esque aura about me. Short, bleach blonde hair that falls in soft Titanic waves. A boyish grin and wide, deep blue come-to-bed eyes. Not that I've ever had any problems in that department. Not yet, that is. I pick my jaw and my puppy dog tongue up off the wooden floorboards before they begin to gather sawdust. Swaggering back over towards the bar, I give her a sneaky sideways glance. She's leaning against a huge white pillar at the corner of the room. I watch her accept a light from a tall, effeminate 20-something gay boy. Looks like an 80s version of the Milky Bar kid in his cowboy hat and gingham shirt. His name is John or John Joe or Jojo or something equally camp and annoying. I recognise him as a regular who always hangs out with a posse of mini-skirted high-heeled straight girls. The kind who totter about their nail extensions and long, silky panty hair. Kind of girls I like, but no, I can never have. Shit, I hope she's not a fucking fag hag. The scene is becoming overpopulated with them. Stupid, giggling, hetty girls who come into our pubs to perv at us. I wouldn't mind being a little walk on. I wouldn't mind being a little walk on the queer side. A little experimentation never hurt anyone. In fact, it should be compulsory. But they're all too scared to try it in case they chip the nail varnish. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Eli. Oh my God, this is making me want to reread Vicky Romeo. Joe, would you go ahead?
Yeah, I'm going to read something from Eve, which is a play I performed in the I don't know, with the NTS, National Theatre of Scotland, in the Travis, and then the Sits in Dundee, and then somewhere in the north of Scotland, whose name I have forgotten, and then we took it to Belo Horizonte in Brazil. So, and it begins like this. This all began when I was a child. When I looked in the mirror and saw a boy, didn't really know who he was, and well, that made me so afraid. I was very young then. I was maybe 4 or 5, but old enough to know I could tell no one. Old enough to know it was too dangerous to say. It's not true what they tell you, that children don't know their own minds. I knew mine. I just couldn't give it a name. And today I want to write a manifesto. I want to write a manifesto because I feel militant. Because I've been thinking about my life. I've been looking through the photographs. I've been making a list of everything that happened. I've been writing it all down. This is when they sent me away. This is when my mum died. This is when I thought it was all my fault. This is when no one spoke to me for months and months. This is when I thought no one would ever love me. This is when I wanted to die. This is when Lorca taught me not to die and I went to Spain. This is when I ate yogurt for the very first time. But at first, There was nothing. It was like I didn't exist. Shortly after my mum died, I got taken to the pantomime, my first ever trip to the theatre. Oh, I saw Billy Dainty as Widow Twanky in Aladdin. He was dressed as a ballerina. I don't know why. And he did a striptease right down to his underwear, and everyone laughed at him. But what he did could have been beautiful. I wanted to be the Princess Jasmine because she wore the most beautiful dresses. Well, I must have known somehow, deep inside, known that I was Widow Twanky. And that meant everyone would laugh at me. My dad used to watch the boxing. And sometimes he'd let me watch it too, as a special treat. I'd keep my eyes tight shut and listen to the commentator. Because in spite of everything, his voice was kind. My dad liked to watch the black and white minstrel show. I wanted to be one of the chorus girls and have long legs in tights and wear a sparkly leotard and on the top of my head have a plume and dance in high heels and always keep smiling. But I couldn't do that, could I? I wasn't even supposed to think that, was I? Being a boy. But don't think I'm going to tell you a story of suffering, a story of unhappiness and betrayal and being a victim of it all. And I will not tell you the story of a girl born into a boy's body, whose troubles end when she meets a nice, kind surgeon who gives her a vagina. Oh no, because a girl can have a penis. A boy can have a vagina. We all have our bodies, and they are beautiful. I've come here to tell you a story of a child who was frightened and angry, a child who was lied to throughout their young life, but who became someone beautiful. A beautiful person they were all along. And I want the story I tell to spread hope and communicate gratitude for the beauty and the courage and the riches we bring to the world. And I know where I want to begin.
Thank you so much, Joe. Your performance is always so powerful. I got chills just listening. Thank you both so much. So I wonder if we could start the conversation, if you both want to tell us very briefly how you got started writing and performing. Let's see. Joe, you go first.
Okay. Well, I started writing, I don't know why, but the idea came to me that, well, the conviction came to me that I was going to be a writer when I was about, I don't know, about 12 or 13. And then a couple of years later, I started performing. I was in a boys' boarding school and they gave me the girls' parts. And I loved that. I loved rehearsal. I loved performing. I loved playing those parts. Somehow, when I had a dress on and I had the makeup on, I had the wig on, and those amazing, that feeling you get when you get full slide eyelashes on, that was just gorgeous. And I felt more like myself. I felt happy. I felt like I was a person. I wasn't shy anymore. There was a place for me in the world. But so obviously I discovered my vocation at that moment. But as time went on and I got a bit older, I was in a very brutal school. I was a boarder there. I was at everybody's mercy. And I thought, if people get to know that I'm enjoying this, they will make my life unbearable. They will torment me to a point which I won't be able to survive. And because this was in the 60s, I mean, there were no words in those days no words for trans, no words for transsexual, transgender. These words didn't exist, and I had no way of understanding myself. There were no trans people visible anywhere. I thought I was the only person in the whole world. And so I had to suppress. The only thing I could do was suppress my female self. And as I suppressed that, I suppressed my capacity to perform. And I tried to write novels for about 20 years. Oh, and I couldn't never finish one. It was all too dull. I just couldn't do it. I ran out of synonyms, really. I said, she said, he replied, they said. How dull was all that? And it took me a long time until, by complete accident, I discovered that I could write dialogue. And then, gosh, 5 years later, this was 1985, I discovered I could write plays. That was when I had my first hit. And then I went on writing plays. And all the time I put, whenever I could, I put a woman in the center of the play, and I made sure that there was a gender balance between men and women in the cast. And when I write plays, I become the characters. So I could really become my female self in my imagination. And also, me and my partner, we were sharing childcare. So I'd spend half the week looking after my children and half the week writing. So I was father and mother to my children, and that was incredibly important to me. And all the time, trying to understand who I was, trying to get to grips with myself. I mean, there was a this awful sort of gender critical stuff that is going around now. Started in the late 80s, early 90s, and I actually believed it. So that completely stopped me from living as a woman for many years, deepened my suffering. But eventually, after my partner died, I realized I just couldn't bear it. I had to start living as a woman. And after that, I began to really enjoy performing. I had rediscovered that old childhood self that I'd buried all those years ago. And so my life is remarkably rich and joyful these days. So I hope that answers your question.
Yes, indeed. Eli, what about yourself?
I started writing for cathartic reasons when I was 15. After having a traumatic brain injury, it had taken about 11 months to get a diagnosis because doctors didn't know. One would take me to the GP and they'd say, "Oh, don't know, you know, just must be adolescent angst." You know, and just say I was a lazy teenager, I was moody and stuff like that, but I didn't know what I liked to eat. I had forgotten how to read and write. I had, like, you know, I couldn't brush my hair properly and stuff like that, and I had to relearn everything again. By the time that I had got a diagnosis of retrograde, antegrade and post-traumatic amnesia, I had the psychiatrist who had actually diagnosed me took 20 minutes to say, yeah, this is a brain injury. And it was a massive relief, but at the same time I was also very, very angry because I'd seen all these doctors who just kept saying, "Who's the Prime Minister?" I don't fucking know at 14, you know, like, would you be interested? And they would just ask these questions that I didn't know the answers to. So the psychiatrist who'd diagnosed me had suggested that I went into the adolescent psychiatry unit where he could keep an eye on me, and this absolutely enraged me. It was so isolating, and like, I know it was thought to be the best thing because there was no sort of facilities for teenagers with brain injuries, but it was a completely wrong thing for me. Despite the doctor there was lovely and everything. So I started writing these like really bad poems and letters to Teenage Magazine at the time, which was Big Magazine. And I write like a couple of letters every week. And I really thought, I didn't think they would get published or anything like that. And I'd been in like 3.5 months, and we'd had Christmas, and I went back to school, and it was the first day back at school, and somebody came rushing up to me. I was in the door, oh, you're famous, like I'm talking about, you know, you're in Big Magazine. And that was it. I felt validated. I had this this letter poem moaning about the world in this magazine, and I didn't write anything else in that magazine again, and I didn't write anything for 18 months because I felt that I had been heard. And the next thing that I wrote, I think it was about homelessness or something like that, and it was another teen magazine, and my mum sent it in, and it ended up being published. And then from then on, I just kept writing these terrible poems, and I really wanted to be a poet and a playwright, and and that hasn't actually happened. But I ended up, I kept going, and teachers at school, and I think Mum and that will have that, oh my God, you want to be a writer? I don't think, you know, people from our background don't become writers. They lived in like a house in scheme and went through, and I'm like, oh no, maybe you could go and work for a newspaper office making the tea, you know. And I joined a creative writing class at college, and so I could figure out what I wanted to do in my life. And sure, there was just like, oh, you want to be writing? Like, you know, he was really great. He said to me, oh, why don't you write about your childhood? And I thought, oh, well, that's not going to work. And he was just like, really? He's like, so why don't you write about what it's like to not be able to remember your childhood? So I started writing like the strongest memory, and I think we got to a point where I got too hard, so I stopped, put it aside, started writing like about people that were made of porridge and like ridiculous stuff. And then he would say to me again a few months later, you know, why don't you try again, try writing something else about yourself? So I did, and then the two stories sort of like met in the middle, and then they got bigger and bigger. And one day I went in, and he's just like, so I think you might be writing a book. And then my memoir Cracked was published in 2002 by Jessica Kingsley Publishers. And I've made it sound as if it's really easy. I only sent it to 2 publishers, and I got really lucky. So I was just really, really lucky that they said yes. I was 22 when I got the book deal, and 24 when it was published. And yeah, there's lots of rejections after that. Yeah, so that's how I got started.
That's great. Thank you so much. So we are going to have a, let's say a 3-minute comfort break if anybody needs a tea or the bathroom. I think Bob will be putting on some slides for us to look at during the, so we'll try and be back here by 8:23, 8:25-ish. right, hello, we are back. Hopefully that was enough of a break for everybody. I realized I said the wrong time to come back, so hopefully no one's taking a 20-minute break. So this is an event about queer writing, obviously, especially across generations. So for each of Joe and Eli today, could you maybe talk a little bit about your first encounter with queer writing or with queerness in writing? Yeah, to start, let's see. Eli, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I think the first sort of experience with queer writing was probably when I read an extract of Negative Space by Zoe Strachan. When I was doing an HNC in professional writing skills, and I think that would have been 2000 to 2001. So it was probably the start of 2001. And the college lecturer was the co-editor of Nerve magazine. Now, they used to do there was a red nerve, a yellow nerve, a green nerve, and this was the blue nerve, this one. So Zoe's bit of a novel was about a life model. And I think that was where the title Negative Spaces came from as well. And I can't remember exactly what the individual piece was about, but the protagonist in Negative Space is a bisexual woman called Stella, and it's a little bit a journey about her, the bereavement that she goes through with her brother, and also the sort of discovering her bisexuality. And I don't even remember if the individual bit, if the individual extract was like explicitly queer, but I'd obviously picked up some kind of vibe from it, and I was just like, oh, what's this? And then our college lecturer had said to us, as part of your course, you have to interview somebody, or you have to set up the interview. She'd done it already. She'd asked people from the magazine, did they mind if a student phoned them or, emailed them and asked them if they could interview them. So it all been sort of set up, but we just had to go through the motions. And I thought, oh, I really want to interview this Zoe Strachan. And when we got asked who we were going to interview, two of us actually said they wanted to interview Zoe, and tutor was just like, oh, you'll have to fight it between you. And normally I'd have went and said, oh, no, it's okay, and I was like, I'm having Zoe. I was just like that. And then I did end up interviewing Zoe, and I started, like, it was very early days on the internet for me. I don't even know if we had it at home. We might have just got the internet at home, so I was looking up all sort of the links about Zoe, and I found this article, and it was queer spotting. So that I was like, and it was Zoe Strachan drags Irvine Welsh's writing out of the closet. And I remember reading it, and I read it actually recently, and I was just like, it's still really brilliant. It still resonates now, and it really got me thinking about my own sexuality, although it was a wee while. I think it was a few months before I came out. So.
Great. Joe, what about yourself?
Well, there was no queer writing when I was around, so there was none. It just didn't exist. So I don't know. It's very hard for me to understand myself. One thing that did happen when I was about 19, I guess, and I was working in a mental hospital in Melrose called Dingleton. One of the psychiatrists lent me a book called Childhood in Society by Erik Erikson, a follower of Freud. And this is about the way in which the way children are brought up was kind of reflected their culture. And there was a chapter on, I called it The Indians of the Plains. It was all about the first people of North America. And I read there that adolescent children, boys and girls, were encouraged to record their dreams. And that if a boy dreamt of the moon, and the moon offered the boy a choice between a bow and arrow, which was a symbol of the man, and a burden strap, the thing that mother would carry a child in, which was a symbol of woman. And the moon would invite the boy to choose. And sometimes the boy would maybe reach out for the bow and find suddenly that the moon had swapped them around, or sometimes the boy would find himself going to pick up the emblem of womanhood. And if a boy dreamt that, when he woke up, he could go to the elders of the tribe and say, I've had this dream, and then be allowed to wear women's clothes and do women's tasks, and still be accepted as an honoured and valued member of the tribe. It was only a paragraph or maybe two, but it just moved me so profoundly, because up to then I thought I was probably the only person like myself in the whole world, and to discover that there had been, and maybe even still were, societies in which people like myself existed and had a place and were honoured, was just so incredibly important to me. And it probably kept me alive. And then gradually, as I got older, I started to be aware of gay men writing, Jules, for instance. And I kind of wished I was gay, because at least that meant I'd be somebody. But as it was, I felt like I was nobody. And I don't think I saw any reflections of myself being presented as a proper human being until I saw The Crying Game when I was in my 40s. And that was the first time that I'd seen a trans woman on screen being presented as a decent, valued human being. And of course, there's the nasty side to it, because when the man discovers who she is, he slaps her and he runs off to be sick. And that's just, but in my state of mind, I kind of accepted that. But nonetheless, that validation that, yes, I existed, it took a very long time coming. And so I've had to create, in a way, I've had to create my own role models and hopefully act as a role model for other people. And I get, I don't know, I was very touched to get a letter from a young person in Brazil yesterday saying how important my presence had been for them in this world and how much strength that gave them. I thought, wow, well, that's because that's what I'd like to do. I'd like to be a role model for people younger than myself, so that they can say, okay, it is possible to be successful, and it's possible to be happy, and it's possible to be queer and trans, and possible to be a father and possible to be a grandmother, all at the very same time.
And you are a role model. So my question, yes. Joe and Eli, are you with us? Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Hello.
Yeah.
Great. Yeah, what do we think we can learn from other sort of generations within our community? Joe, what do you think?
Oh, I think there's so much to learn. I mean, the other week I was performing down in Manchester at something called Trans Vegas, which happened in a big converted car park, and the organizer, an amazing trans woman called Kate O'Donnell, is slightly shocked by me, because generally I don't wear makeup and I don't try to look glamorous or anything. And I think she must have decided that it was time we did something about this. So she introduced me to a drag queen in Manchester called Lil, who was going to look after my look. Okay. And so I went and met Lil in their workshop, which was a room full of the most amazing dresses. And it really, I don't know, it struck home to me how, when I was young, I was completely deprived of this. And there was Lil, and they were completely straightforward about it. We tried on various dresses, and the first one I tried on was a kind of Shirley Bassey dress. It was kind of slinky and sparkly and very tight fitting. And when I was young, I really, really wanted to be Shirley Bassey. I just adored Shirley Bassey. And I tried the dress on, and oh my God, it was far too tight. It showed my tummy, and it had this huge slit right up to my crotch. And I thought, how am I going to walk in this? And so I kind of rather sadly decided that actually Shirley Bassey was not for me. But at the same time, Lil was completely unfazed by all this. For Lil, it just didn't matter. There was a total relaxation, a total acceptance of who I was, who they were. And they were so refreshingly clear of all the shit that so tormented me when I was young. And that was very, very beautiful to see. And it's fantastic. I get very excited when I meet people like you, Eris, and people like Eli again, and they. Ah, God, I mean, when I came out, I was 50 years old. This was the year 2000. And I identified myself as somebody that was bi-gendered. It was a word I made up because, you know, there weren't any words. But now people are saying they're non-binary. And I go, yes, that was me. And I had to go through the whole thing of living as a woman and all that to discover that. And it's, you know, you two, just smiling at me on the screen at the moment, you, Eli and Eris, are the most amazing inspiration to me. People like you, because you are saying, yes, change is possible. Yes, all that suffering that I went through is not necessary. There is a different way of being, a different way of handling gender. And I think that's incredibly, incredibly liberating. So thank you both for being my role model.
Thank you. Let's thank all of us. Eli, what about yourself? What do you think?
A lot of the books that I actually like are books that I read like 20, plus years ago. I do really like Sarah Waters, although the first Sarah Waters book I read was about 20 years ago, Fingersmith. I really like sort of queer historical fiction. And I also, I see what you like about the old pulp novels. Some of them they didn't have the best endings and things like that. But some of them had really great sense of place. It was just like, it just really felt as you were in those sort of smoky, like dusky kind of bars. I felt like I was really transported to that time. And I know that I think it's just the market is really saturated with new books coming out. I haven't really found books that have resonated with me in the same way as the Sarah Waters stuff or Emma Donoghue, her early work especially, the stuff that was like set in Ireland, the play that she wrote about the two women that got married. They got married as a straight couple, and I don't know, that all of those things really. Those are the books that I sort of ate up and felt like I was learning from people who'd come before me. Maybe it's just that I'm picking up books that are set now, and I'm like, I already know that. And like years ago, it must have been about 2003. Zoe Strachan gave me one of Jules' plays. And I don't know what play it was, but I think it was about 2003 because I would have been at Glasgow Uni then. And she said, I think you'll really like this writer. And it might have had a trans theme. I can't remember. But yeah, I did like it, and I went on to look at all stuff, and it was really exciting. Yeah.
That's so moving to me. It's just lovely to hear.
That's beautiful. I mean, I just love that we can all sort of encounter each other in the wild. And so let's see. It's actually time for another break. But after the break, you two will be asking each other questions. And I also want to say to everyone in the audience at the moment, we will have time at the end of this event tonight for audience questions. So if there's anything that we've not talked about this evening, but that you'd like to ask either or both of our speakers, put them in the chat and I will be keeping track of those. So you've got some time now, say 5 minutes, to think about it. And actually this time we're going to be back by 8:25. All right, that's us back. Right, I hope everyone's sitting comfortably. So it's time for the part where you two ask each other questions. And this, I'm excited about this because I can just sit back and watch the conversation. So do you have questions you want to ask each other? Shall I pick someone to start? Eli, do you want to ask the first question?
Yeah. What is your favourite monologue or piece of theatre that you like to perform?
Well, I love. I mean, I've written these two big monologues. They've gone for about an hour and a bit. And actually, at the moment, I'm working on something that isn't a monologue. That's something where I'm on stage with another actress, and that's fantastic, actually. But I love them both. I love Eve because it's telling my story and it's giving value to my story. And I'm always amazed by what happens afterwards, because all kinds of people come up to me and they say, gosh, that could be my story. And these often aren't, you know, they're not trans people, these are straight people. Very, very respectable, very straight people. And I don't think they're closet trans, they're just, it's just that something about my story releases something in them and enables them to access it. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I love Jesus because it's about blessing people. And I think offering people a blessing on stage, offering them something that makes them feel better about themselves, or enables them to feel better about themselves, that enables them to be seen, I think that's fantastic. And also, I mean, it's both these monologues are really healing to me, because they are absolutely resisting profound moment of shame. I mean, when I was 15 and I gave up acting, I thought, if anybody knows that I want to be a girl, they'll hate me. And then in 2009, when I first performed Jesus, Queen of Heaven, and there were hundreds of people in the street outside furious with me. And then later on, there are hundreds of thousands of people on the internet who were furious with me and hated me and thought I was ridiculous and absurd and disgusting, and all the tabloids that I was disgusting. And it was like, okay, all those worst fears, because I thought, okay, these people do know I'm trans and they do hate me. And yes, I'm terrified, but I have survived. I am going to survive. And their hatred tells me that what I am doing really matters and is really important. Mm-hmm. And so it gave me strength. And every time I perform Jesus, I remember that, and it gives me strength. So I guess, well, anyway, I love them both. Ooh, can I ask you something? Is that allowed? Is it my turn? I'm really curious. There's something about us both, and that is that we both of us sort of, I don't know. I mean, it's just like we started writing. Was it by accident? Was it? It just obviously came as a bit of a surprise to you that you could write. Is that right? You just sort of went, oh. So where do you think this impulse came from? What?
I think the thing is, if you're in an adolescent psychiatric unit, there wasn't much else to do. you could. I mean, I started writing letters to people. I think I just ran out of folk to moan at. So I then started writing to the magazine. Yeah, because that was pretty much all there was. The only way out was to write down how you felt.
Were you encouraged to do that, or did you just do it?
I think around that time it was kind of pen pals. What folk had pen pals and stuff. I mean, I remember in high school, one of my friends took, you know, she had a pen pal that was French, she had a pen pal that was German. I did have a German pen pal for a wee while, but it was like, you know, it was just like, how are you? Do you have a sister? Yes. You know, that sort of thing. Yeah, it was just that I think at that age, and there was no internet, or I didn't have internet, and that was the thing that people were doing. I mean, I remember going into school and writing letters to my pal that I'd see in the morning, you know, once I was out. So I think it was very much of the time. I still write letters to pals because I like writing longhand. But yeah, I think it was just very much of the time because I did that for all those months.
And then, I'm cheating. I'm going to ask you another question. But then the other thing that interests me is that I mean, I wanted to be a novelist, and that was a stupid idea. I couldn't be a novelist. And you wanted to be a poet and a playwright. And well, I'm sure it wasn't a stupid idea, but you couldn't do it. What do you think it is that tells us what the right form is? How do we know? Where does that come from? That strikes me as really strange.
I think, I mean, I had a shot at stand-up comedy for a while and I was really rotten at it. Oh, this came up in another talk that I did like a year or so ago, and I was like, how did you know that? It's somewhere in my CV I'd written something. Yeah, I was not good at it. But people, like friends will say, and like people that I don't know very well say, you're very funny. And I feel like I can make people laugh with my prose.
Yeah.
I was not able to do that. You know, I was not able to do that in drama. But I never say never. I mean, I think I'd quite fancy writing a play. Don't know. I think I'm really all about the voice. I really like writing dialogue. I like writing monologues. So it kind of lends itself to that. But I think I don't know enough sort of technical stuff about playwriting.
Because you know, that's the thing about your writing. There's this incredibly strong voice coming through. Beautiful, earthy, funny, salty. Can I say salty kind of voice? That is just a pleasure to listen to, even though you're just listening to it in your imagination. So I shouldn't be pointing at my ears. I should be pointing at your head or something. And it's just gorgeous. Yeah.
Oh, Ash, another one. What's your favourite place that you've performed a play in? Favourite venue, like theatre or
venue? Huh. Do you know, there was the weirdest one. The weirdest one was a museum in Belo Horizonte. It was called the Museo Mineiro, and it was a room full of saints hidden behind glass cases. Sometimes they were made out of silver and precious metals, and they'd been created in the sort of 18th century, something like that, when this part, the state that Belo is in is called Minas Gerais, which means general mines. It was where all the gold and all the silver was mined in Brazil. And they often employed slaves to create pictures of Christian saints. But the slaves didn't worship Christian saints. They had their own religion that came across from Africa that was connected to voodoo. And the religion they had figures, had archetypes, spiritual beings, and they disguised them as saints. So the Virgin Mary, for instance, was a woman goddess, and so on. And there they all were, these saints, incredibly lively, incredibly full of life, behind glass cases that had been created by slaves in secret. And we, it's very old. So that's where I performed, and I can remember that I had a bodyguard at that time, because there's a lot of hatred. And the bodyguard wouldn't let me out of his sight, but I would sort of get into a lift and go up, and then I could walk along the corridor and go into this space and perform. And it was amazing. But there was something about the energy of those saints, I sometimes think, because I think the last night of the show, I collapsed on stage. My heart just went funny, and I fell down and had to be taken to emergency hospital, but that's another story. So in a way, it's a bit of a nightmare venue, but it was just incredibly powerful, and amazing to be doing the show there. Astonishing. Yeah, so I guess that was the most powerful space. I don't know if it's the favourite one. Probably the favourite one was the Citizens in Glasgow, because gosh, that's such a beautiful stage. And when I was young, I used to see the shows that Giles Havergal and them put on, which just blew my mind and showed me that it was possible to create theatre that was not naturalistic. It was very, very important to me. And to stand on that stage where these incredibly beautiful, glamorous people were, it was so exciting. And the theatre was full every night. And people were quiet. People listened. And there's the most amazing power in that. So that's another favourite. That's a really favourite space. Because then that was when I really, really thought, okay, I can do this. I can hold an audience. That That was a real revelation. It was beautiful.
So I'm going to jump in because it's time for our second readings.
Oh,
how does that sound? So, Eli, do you want to go first? Tell us what you're reading from, which is a project I'm very excited about. And then, yeah, take it away.
I'm going to read from a novel that I've been working on since I had the idea for this novel in 2003. Although I did write it as a short story, I didn't start writing it until about 2006. And I have went back and forth with this, and I've never been able to get it right. Every time I have a gap for a few months or a couple of years, I come back and think, oh my God, that's all wrong, start again. So here I am again, starting again, although I've not completely through the entire book out this time. It's called King Street, and it's a cross between the Black Dahlia and Priscilla, Queen of the Desert, only it's set in 2007, and the murder victim is a male impersonator. So I'm just going to read from the first 2 pages of the opening. So here I go. Before Kelly turned up, before the Kings and the talent contest and all the media bollocks and candlelit vigils, I was quite happy being a miserable dickhead, blaming the rest of the world for my problems. I got to stalk idiots from my old high school on the internet and roll my eyes because yet another one of them had gotten married or divorced or spat out their 10th brat in a decade. Dark, lonely nights bled into long, dreary days, and in the autumn of 2001, after Pat O'Brien wangled me a job selling tube tickets in Partick Station, those days continued to get duller. I knew Pat from the Glasgow Trans Men's Health Group. He was a fellow Elvis fan and vinyl purist. We both smoked Camel Whites and drank Jim Beam. I was still pre-T then, still going through the motions of the obligatory bullshit real life test, and I hadn't yet made it onto the insanely long list of trans guys, desperate for double mastectomies. Pat, in comparison, was a barrel-chested baritone with a goatee and receding hairline. Folk at Strathclyde Passenger Transport had already gone through the what not to say to a man with a vagina protocol. Pat was very vocal about his gender reassignment. I preferred to duck my head, drop my voice and hope to God nobody noticed me. Our politics were similar, but one day when the subject of his impending genital surgery was mentioned in the staff room, I found myself cringing. For 3 months, we worked side by side. He never let on the truth of how we knew each other. And when one of the engine drivers asked if we were related, Pat spun him a ridiculous yarn about being my long-lost father. Looks-wise, we were a bit like Laurel and Hardy. My real dad had been 5'5", skinny and ginger, and I'd inherited the stature and the hair. Pat was a paunchy Richard Gere lookalike who towered over most folk at 6 feet. Eventually, I got my testosterone. It was the thing I'd both longed for and dreaded. My whole life, I'd wanted to be a professional singer. At 17, I defied my mother and all expectations from our tiny working-class town when I buggered off to London in search of fame and fortune. Then at 25, I found it gallivanting across the country, carving out a niche career as a male impersonator. Later, though, it seemed in order to become a real man, I might have to sacrifice the only thing I liked about myself. If anyone at work had a problem with me or Pat, they never said it to our faces. Pat was famous for his foul-mouthed jokes and homemade fruit scones, and he parcelled out both indiscriminately during break times. People laughed and ate heartily, asked what he got up to the weekend, then they laughed even harder when he told them. The fake father story was reprised at various intervals and often left me with a lump in my throat. My own interactions with colleagues were stilted and awkward like something from a B-movie. I joined the team as Alan, a name that apparently means cheerful and handsome, after considering a string of possibilities based on the dead name I'd been lumbered with for 29 years. My surname is and always has been Cassidy. That I've kept solely because it reminds me of my favourite Wild West hero who later turned to crime. Alan Cassidy, the handsome hero. I certainly didn't feel like one. Pretending we were Kid Cassidy and Reno Jones helped take the edge off the boredom though at first. then Pat get promoted to station master at St Enoch's. A shock for both of us, and one he couldn't refuse. That was mid-November 2001. The week before, a fight had broken out in the concourse between a lesbian skinhead and a teenage trans girl in metal-tipped stilettos. The skinhead ended up with a perforated eardrum.
Thank you. I love the way your writing pokes fun at queer culture. It's like, it's always so good-natured, but like quite damning. Joe, what would you like to read?
Yes. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to read the do the blessing from the end of Jesus, Queen of Heaven. And now, normally by this stage, the whole stage is lit by candles. So I'm going to try and recreate this moment by lighting a candle. Okay. And then I think I might do something quite daring and turn a light out. Oh, there we are. That looks pretty good, eh? And when you're at home, you are at home, aren't you? If you've got somebody with you, it would be a really nice thing if you were able to hold each other's hands, because that's kind of part of what happens. And maybe you could just pretend you're holding somebody's hand, somebody that you love. Or if you've got a teddy bear handy, you could hold their hand. That would be rather nice. Whatever you do, remember, we're all here together. You might even want to close your eyes, actually, but it's all up to you. Sometimes people like that. Right, so the blessing goes like this. Bless the timid and the shy, for we shall be shameless. Bless the lonely and misunderstood, for we shall have everyone we want. Bless the poor, for we shall be rich. Bless the rich, for we shall lose everything. Bless the boy in the closet in the silk wedding gown, for we shall come out. Bless the prostitute, for we shall be honoured. Bless the frigid and the impotent, for we shall have sex forever and ever and ever. Bless the fathers who don't care, because we've never been cared for we shall be loved. Bless the mothers who hit, because we cannot still our children's tears, for we shall be comforted. Bless the bully and the criminal, for we shall lose all fear. Bless the sad, frightened people who go into government, for we shall lose all power. Bless us when we starve, or we shell, or we bomb those people we consider to be our enemies. And bless our enemies who fight back as best we can. For one day we shall come to know we are all one people in the end. Bless, bless Lavender Menace Bookshop for all the joy and the pleasure and the pride it brings to everyone in the world. Bless Eris and Eli, because they are such wonderful writers. May they have huge success in everything they do. Bless all the people who are ill with COVID. May they get better soon. Bless those looking after them, because one day they will get the reward they deserve. bless us in whatever extraordinary city we happen to be living in. And bless us all. Bless us when we're happy. Bless us when we're sad. Bless us when we're frozen in terror. Remind us we are not alone. We never were. We never are. We never shall be. For he is she, and she is he, and we are they, and they are we, and shall be, forever and forever and forever. Amen. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. I feel blessed.
Good.
Oh, this has been such a pleasure and a privilege. I think it is time for some audience questions. Let's see. So we've got a couple. There's still time. Y'all can put them in the chat if you like. And I've got some that I want to ask. So our first audience question is from Leslie. And it's sort of a general, well, I think we could, it's quite a tough one, so I don't know if we'll be able to answer it satisfyingly this evening. But maybe we could talk a little more. So the question is, are the gender crits winning the argument around GRA reform with the help of a hostile mainstream media? And Leslie says, I feel less accepted and less acceptable than I did 5 or 6 years ago. So this is sort of about, well, yeah, it's about sort of media portrayals of trans people and trans themes and sort of the ebb and flow of acceptance. And so it's quite a tough one. There's a lot to unpack around it. Do you have any thoughts, speakers?
Well, I don't think they are winning. No, I think there was, I mean, there's been a report, hasn't there, on whatever review it is, and it shows that people are still, in spite of all the shit that these gender crits are saying, people are still largely in favour of reform, and I think it will go through. I think it's very hard to distinguish between what happens on social media and what happens in real life. I mean, the really these gender critical people are very desperate. They know they are losing the argument. They haven't really got an argument to lose. They have nothing to give us but hatred and contempt, and that makes them all the more vocal. There's really not very many of them. They're organized, they're unpleasant, they're unscrupulous. But no, and so of course they do create a very nasty atmosphere, and I'm really sorry that I'm really sorry, Leslie, that that's how you're feeling, and I sometimes feel the same. But on the other hand, when I go out on the street, I don't feel threatened. When I first went out on the street, this was in about 2002, 2003. And I was presenting myself as a woman. Every time I went out, people were hostile. People shouted at me, people laughed at me, people passed really unpleasant remarks in my hearing as if I wasn't there. But that hasn't happened to me for years and years and years. And I don't know if that's me because I've changed or because the world has changed. I think a little bit of both. And I don't know. But then, of course, you see, my perception is a little bit skewed because when I was young, I never imagined for a moment that I would be able to live and work openly as a woman. That just was something I couldn't even begin to imagine. And now it has happened, and it's beyond my wildest dreams. And so perhaps I have a very overly rosy view of things. But I'm very optimistic, and I refuse to to be silenced, and I refuse to allow myself to be dominated by fear. We must, I think, stay together and keep moving forward with joy and hope and pride in our hearts, because that's what we all deserve.
Eli, what do you think?
I don't know if I've got anything to add to that. To be honest with you, I've muted most of it on social media to the point where I don't even know what's happening half the time. I only discovered like all day that there was stuff happening at the Parliament today, because I've muted just about everything that's like transphobia. I've just got all these phrases, so I never know what's going on, and it's made me. It's for my own mental health that I've had to do that, because it was really getting to me.
And I think there's so little benefit to engaging with it on social media, especially. I mean, we can better the world, you know, with our own work, and that doesn't require us to be exposed to people who, well, I hope that is somewhat of an answer to your question, Leslie. It's a very good question, but very, very complex. So we have a question from Sigrid for Eli. So Sigrid says, Eli, you said Vicky Romeo is a historical novel. How has your writing changed since then? And maybe talk about as well about, because you're a writer of queer historical fiction.
Yeah, I
think recent history, but yeah. I
started writing it in 2002. But because it took it took 16 years after I'd finished it to find a publisher, it became a historical novel by accident.
Right.
And I guess the same thing's happening with, I don't know if King Street is finished. Hopefully I'll crack it this time. You know, come up with the idea 2003, and it's set. Most of it's set in sort of like 2007, although it sort of tells you bits and pieces that happen earlier than that. So I guess I'm going back to writing about things that have happened historically, possibly because I couldn't get them published back when I was writing them. People didn't, you know, I'd send stuff out and folk would say, you know, that's funny or whatever, that's really good, but it's too niche. Nobody's going to want to read about that. And now I think publishers are maybe taking more chances, or they've been forced to have sort of like more diverse storylines. But I have been sort of like writing more speculative stuff and having a go at that. It's funny because the weird fiction sort of like people who are writing weird fiction, speculative magazines, are folk who for years have been saying to me, come and write stuff for us, and I'm like, no, I couldn't do that. I write about everyday life. I'm having really great fun. We're writing about, I sort of like write about like Renfrew and stuff like that and where I grew up, but I'll maybe write about a kid who's like going around to his dad's drug dealer to get, you know, to get some heroin, and looks out the close window and sees that there's a flying saucer just landed in the wind sheds. And I just sort of think, oh, what would happen? You should know, at this ordinary housing scheme, what would this kid do? So all the sort of speculative stuff that I'm writing starts off and it just looks like you're just writing about Renfrew and people wondering about Tesco. And then something weird happens.
Yeah, I remember the flying saucer story. It will fond place in my heart. Joe, Sigrid says, I gather you've written the COVID Requiem. What is that about? Tell us more about that, or tell us about that.
It's something that I've co-written with Leslie Orr, a very wonderful feminist, and it came about it came about because when I was forced to live as a boy and my mum died, I wasn't allowed to go to a funeral, and that really hurt me. And then when I was nursing many years later, I was looking after a man who I knew was terribly ill, And I kept trying to get someone to pay attention to him, a doctor or a senior nurse, and nobody did, and he died alone. And I felt terrible about that. And in fact, I still do in a strange kind of a way. And these things stayed with me. And then early last year, my brother died of heart disease, and I went to the funeral. In fact, I was asked to read the elegy for him at his funeral. And, you know, he lived an ordinary life. There was nothing that special about him, but it was incredibly important that his story be told and his story be witnessed, and that we could all come together and talk about him and share memories of him. And so when the pandemic broke out and people had to die alone, families were not allowed to go in with people that were dying. And I thought that must be so terrible. It must have been so terrible for them. And then afterwards, they were not allowed to gather for a funeral. And again, that compounded the hurt and the distress. And I thought, well, perhaps as a theatre maker, I can do something about that. I can start to try to devise a ceremony that will bring people together and acknowledge this grief, acknowledge everybody's grief, because the whole country, the whole world, in fact, is full of grief. It's largely unacknowledged because our culture is very bad with grief. It's full of grief that needs to be brought up, it needs to be held, it needs to be recognised, it needs to be honoured. And I talked to the lovely, amazing woman, Elizabeth Newman, who runs Pitlochry, and so she commissioned me. And so this Monday, actually, we're about to go up to rehearsals, second lot of rehearsals, to create this event, this ceremony, which will happen in the woods behind Pitlochry. It will be a journey through the woods, 5 stations, like the Stations of the Cross or the 5 stages of grief. And it will recognise people's grief, but it will also recognise the contribution that so many people, you know, frontline health workers, but also posties, delivery men, plumbers, delivery drivers, everybody that kept things going, all that they contributed towards it. And so, but it will also be about the rage that I think many of us feel, because people shouldn't have died this young, and the fact that they have died, so many have died in this country, is due to political decisions taken by the Westminster government, who have used and are continuing to use this pandemic as an excuse to enrich their friends and cronies and as a means to destroy the health service, and have failed to give people proper sick leave, have failed, obsessed with sending kids back to school to unsafe classrooms that are not giving people the money or the opportunity to make things better. So there's rage and there's gratitude, and then there's hope that out of all this will come a better world. And I think even though this isn't about being trans, it's a very important thing for a trans artist to be doing. And what is remarkable actually is that there's a massive media interest in this. I mean, I've given interviews to all sorts of people, the Morning Star, the Dundee Courier, Theatre Weekly, there's a big interview in the Scotsman. This Sunday, I'm going to be writing a guest column for the Sunday Post. BBC Television are interested, and the radio are interested. And I think this kind of visibility actually is just a very, you know, it's not about being trans, it's about being a human being trying to do a good job that is necessary and trying to use their skills to make the world a better place, hopefully to make the world a better place. And that's a very, very strong argument against all these horrible gender critical people that are, you know, making so many of our lives a misery. So that's what I'm doing, and I'm very, very proud of it.
Oh my God! Well, I want to go when it debuts. I would love to be there.
Well, go to Pitlochry website and you can buy a ticket.
I will. Well, I think that's just about all the time we have. I want to thank everyone in the audience. Thank you so much for coming out tonight and supporting us and Lavender Menace. keep an eye on this event series. I want to thank Sigrid and Bob. Thank you very much for inviting me to host this event and for having us all here. And of course, finally, thank you so much, Eli. Thank you so much, Joe. I've had such a wonderful time this evening.
Thank you for looking after us so well.
Well, you are more than welcome. I think that's us. Yeah.